In this video, we're going to go over how to cut these tenons, and we're going to use the PantoRouter to do that. We're also going to show how to do all of the little back pieces here with the little mortises that they cut for those to fit into on those as well. The parts you need are going to be your back slats, and this one has 6 of those, and you need all 4 of your rails. Rail number 1 and rail number 2, remember those are the big thicker ones there, and then rail 3 and 4. Also, you're going to need your legs that you did already from previously with all your mortises cut in those with that CNC machine. And so we'll need to cut all the tenons first, check that they fit, and then we're going to go ahead and do all the back slats after that. All right, I want to show you this PantoRouter. This machine is what we're going to use to cut those tenons on. And I've already set some things up on this so you can get your board placed right up against that little black fence. And then I have this little swing stop that'll tell you how far forward to put your board. And we'll take these little clamps and we're going to just lower those down and then just pull those up to tighten that up. We just want to make sure that board is nice and firm on there. And then let's make sure we pull that swing stop out of there so we don't hit it with the bit. How the PantoRouter works, and this is a really neat thing about it, it has this little pattern. And there's different patterns you can place on here. And then this little pin will just kind of follow that pattern, and that way it'll just cut that shaped tenon into your board. And then it has the little handle here that you can just move forward and back, and that'll place that router forward or back as you're cutting. And we just follow around that pattern as we go and make this cut. And so we'll go ahead and show you how to do this. Here's our on button to turn it on as well, just real close. So we're going to go ahead and get this one started, turn that on, and then I'm just slowly coming into this. Again, I'm not trying to do the whole thing all at once, just taking off a little bit at a time and having that pin kind of just follow along the outside of that pattern there. And as I get a little bit closer, I'm just going to go a little bit slower around and maybe kind of just back and forth a little bit to really just make sure it's hitting every little spot on this. And then we'll just pull it away when it's done. And just releasing those clamps or just hit that little lever and then they can lift up and we can get those boards out of there. And I like to test this little tenon here to just see if it'll fit in my pattern. There are some micro adjustments we can do on that pin. This one looks to fit just nice and perfect. So we'll flip our board around and get the other side of this done now. Again, use that little swing stop to get it lined up where you want, clamped real tight, and we're just going to take a little bit off at a time and then follow that red pattern with that pin. Very easy to use. I'm really loving this PantoRouter, and it can do a lot more than just these little shaped tenons that I have here. So, and it has a really good fit there, nice and tight. We're going to go ahead and get the other rail. Again, this is the smaller rail. This is rail 3 and 4 that I've been working on first. Get that one clamped in there nice and tight, and just get that pattern cut on there. These tenons are kind of fun and unique. They're almost like a little infinity shape as we're cutting these, but again, there's a whole bunch of variety of patterns that we could use with this PantoRouter if we wanted to. And this is a pattern I just chose that I thought was kind of a neat one. Also gives a lot of strength as we're making this. So we got that one done, and our next ones here, these are going to be those big thick ones. These are those rail 1 and 2. The way we do this exact same, just clamp them on here nice and tight, get it on forward up to that little swing stop for how far forward we go. But the difference on these big thick ones here is that tenon, even though it's the same size, we've got to remove a lot of material just off the top of this first. So I'm just going to go back and forth real lightly off the very top of this board. And I'm just trying to hog away a little bit at a time here. And I'm not even touching that red pattern on this PantoRouter yet. I'm just getting a lot of material off. And then eventually I'm going to make my way, finally get over to that pattern and just swing around back and forth on this nice and slow and get that all the way down. So you can see that that tenon there, again, it's not in the center of the board, it's down lower, and this will help when we go to cut that curve shape later. So it just makes it a nice shape. Now when I do the other side, I want to make sure that that is facing the same direction with that tenon actually facing the bottom part. So we'll get that clamped on tight and get the other side of this board done. Same thing, I'm just hogging away a little bit at a time from the top of the board down and not really trying to go all the way on that pattern just yet, but then I eventually make my way on that pattern and go all the way around this. So really neat machine, this PantoRouter, and I'm excited to use it for other things. Here I've got my very last rail here set up, just a different angle. You can kind of see how it follows that pattern as I'm swinging this around. Okay, we've got one more end to go on this. Now obviously this video is showing this in a lot faster speed, so we would go a lot slower and more careful as we're doing this when you're cutting each of these little tenons here. Nice and easy, it'll cut really clean. And again, I do like to check that they fit. This one's going to go on that top of that leg, and just a good snug fit on this thing. I'm really happy with the results of this. Okay, we just got all those tenons cut on the PantoRouter, and I did just check them to make sure that they fit in those, and they fit really nice. Our next step on this is we're just going to take these thicker ones now. This is rail number 1 and rail number 2, and we're going to get that curve cut in the back of it, and also before that we're going to cut all of our little mortises for those back slats to fit into. And I've got this set up over on the CNC that we can run these. We are going to mount these boards here. Again, this is the thicker ones. This is rail number 1 and number 2. And we're going to use our little vertical mount plate here on the front of the CNC, and I've got a little piece already set up for this. When we do this, we want to just make sure our board is placed so that these tenons are facing out towards us. They're not going to be flipped around that way. It's going to be out towards us like that. It just sits right on this little metal shelf right here. And then we've got our clamps, and we're just going to take our little clamps here and just get this thing mounted nice and firm on here. And how far over you're going, I would just come over and just butt it right into the side of this little metal plate. In fact, maybe just back it up just a hair so it's not hitting that. And we'll just get this tightened up real tight, make sure everything's nice and flat everywhere, and then we're ready to get our CNC ready to go. We need to go ahead and get the CNC zeroed out for the X and Y zero. We're going to do it to this little corner right here, and in fact I've already programmed this. If you look at the current offset, it says 1, but if we change that, click on that little current offset, and let's go to number 3, I believe is the one I have, and then you just hit enter. That's going to change our X and Y 0. Remember, if we go to manual data input, and I just type in X0, Y0, and then I hit enter, it's going to move the machine over to that XY0, what's already pre-programmed. If I hit that page down on mine, it'll lower that bit here. And this is gonna just check to make sure that we are zeroed out right at the corner of that board there. And I believe we've got it pretty good. Now your Z needs to be zeroed to the top of the board. Again, we can use the Smart Tool Pad for that when we do this and get that zeroed out, and then we'll load up our code. After we've zeroed out our X, Y, and Z, we now need to load the code. And the one we're going to look for, again on the computer there, I've already got it saved under the rocking chair folder here. There's one of them that's called Rocking Chair Rails Mortise 6, and the other one's Rail Mortise 5. So I'm going to do that one. Depends on how many you're doing on your project, but we'll go ahead and open that up, and then we just go ahead and hit cycle start. Here we go, watching the CNC cut out those 6 mortises here. One thing to make sure of as we're doing this, again, just make sure those clamps are held really tight so this board doesn't move at all on you when it's cutting these out. And then we're going to switch it out to the other board. This is that rail, the thicker ones there. When I do mount my other board here, I want to make sure those tenons are facing out again as I do this, nice and tight and firm on here. Now we don't have to do our X, Y, and Z 0 again. It should remember it all. So you just hit cycle start once you get this one clamped in, and it'll cut the same thing out. Here we're going to take our rocking chair rail curve pattern, and we're going to trace this on here. This is going to get that curve cut, and just hold it nice and steady as you're tracing that. Might be helpful to have someone else trace as you're holding it, but go ahead and get both those placed on there, and that pattern should fit just nice and perfect so we can get these cut out. And we could use the CNC to cut this curve out instead, but I'm going to go ahead and just use the bandsaw. One thing to consider and just make sure of is that we get that guard just barely adjusted above the board here. Now again, I have this on a faster speed on this video. Obviously you would go a lot slower and more steady as we're cutting. Don't cut off your line at all. We want to leave a little bit of space for to sand after. And so again, this just takes some practice getting this perfect, but we want to just be real careful, steady, leaving a little bit of wood between our line and where we're cutting. And then on this bandsaw again, when we're done, we're going to take this over to our sander and just get these nice and smooth. Here I'm at the horizontal belt sander. You could also use a disc sander or some other type of sander to sand these. And I'm just trying to get all those bandsaw marks out, just going right down to my line that I traced on my pattern here. Just doing the outside curve right now. And you could also use a spindle sander for this part if you'd like. Now I'm on the inside curve. If you keep it steady moving here, it'll make it so it doesn't have any divots or any bumps in this. So just a nice, slow, steady movement. We're going to just see if these back slats fit in these little mortises here. And mine are a little bit too tight, not fitting very well. So if I get my calipers here, I want to just verify that my thickness of my back slat matches that mortise, and I'm measuring this, and it's just about 3/8 of an inch thick there, maybe just a little bit more than 3/8. And I'm measuring the inside of that hole, and that one is, again, a little bit less than that 3/8. So I'm just going to jump over to my wide belt sander here and just get these sanded down so that they fit just a little bit easier into those mortises there. Looks like, yeah, I'm just starting at 3/8 on this, and I'm just going to go down about 1/100 of an inch at a time and just go down on this wide belt sander until I get it down to the same thickness there. So it looks like I got it to fit just right, so just about 0.345 inches thick on that. So looks like we're just a good fit. We're going to jump over to our drill press next. And I've got a jig here. This is going to be cutting the little curved parts at the bottom and top of each of those back slats. So I'm just going to switch my bit out. I'm going to put in my Forstner bit. This is a 2 1/8 inch Forstner bit, and I made this little jig to hold these boards. I'm just going to line up that jig right perfectly with the drill press where it's fitting there. Just kind of set my stop in place so I can get this adjusted and clamped on here real tight and firm so it doesn't move on me. And this is a neat little jig. And we just take our slats, and you can actually take 2 at a time on your slats here when you're doing these, and we're just going to drill out these little corners of them instead of using the bandsaw. And you're welcome to use a bandsaw to cut these whatever shape you want, but this is just a method that we used. It makes it so they're all exactly the same each and perfect. So they just slide in right here, real nice and firm. I'm just going to hold them in place, and I'm just going to drill down, and it'll cut both at the same time as I'm doing this. And pretty slick, pretty neat. Again, it usually makes it so I can make them all exactly the same, so there's no errors or defects or anything like that. So I did one side there, and I'm just going to flip these over, clear some of that little sawdust out of there. Get the other side now, just put them right back in, fit them in perfectly, and just go ahead and drill this other side. And you can see that both sides are going to be mirror image of itself, and just nice, easy way to do this. There we go, we got both of them the exact same. We're going to do the opposite side on this as well, just kind of flip them in there. Again, I like to just blow out any sawdust that gets in there, make sure that it doesn't get in the way, so these boards can just line up exactly the same spot each time. So we'll go ahead and drill all of these back slats, both sides, both ends, using that little jig. We're going to come over to our table saw now, and we're going to cut these little spots there where it didn't get all the way straight on the table saw. And I'm just going to measure how far from the edge of that board to where I want to have the blade be cutting. I just want to have it cut a little nice straight line, which I measured this was 1 7/8. So I just set my fence 1 7/8 and just verifying that that's lined up where it's going to cut. Looks like it is. So we're going to just be real careful as we cut this. Cut it, flip it over, and get the other side. And you'll notice when we do this, we just go nice and slow, and it'll just nip off that last little bit there. And once it gets that, you can just back it up, and we'll just flip it over and get the other side. And this is just a neat little way. You could use the bandsaw on this too, but this is a nice way to keep this nice and straight and make it just nice, perfect. There, it turned out great. And I do like to clear those little pieces out of there. Obviously make sure the blade's off and keep that area clean. So we're just gonna go ahead and get all the rest of these cut real quick on this table saw. This method is, again, a really neat way to get these all perfect and straight. If you need to, come on over to the spindle sander. Maybe that table saw, just put a tiny little table saw blade mark into the edge of that. And we can just bump this real gently and lightly and smooth these up a little bit. And that way you don't see any of those table saw marks. So we'll just go ahead and just get those done to all my back slats there. Smooth, nice and clean looking. All right, one more time I'm gonna check to see if this fits now. And still, obviously it doesn't fit because these mortises have rounded edges there and my back slats are square. So we just need to go ahead and take a little router bit and just round over these edges here. I'm just gonna use a little 1/4 inch, or actually this is an 1/8 inch round over bit for this. And we're gonna hit all those edges, both faces on this, just round over those edges, and then that should hopefully make that just slide right into these little mortises here. Again, get both sides, and we're going to flip this over and get this ran. This little 1/8 inch router bit, real easy to use, real simple. It's got that ball bearing on there that just allows us to kind of just hug the edge of the board as we're doing this. So we'll see if it fits. Still a little tight. So that rounded hole on that mortise was actually a 1/4 inch round over, but an 1/8 inch router bit's going to be a little bit easier on these 3/8 boards. So I'm just going to take some sandpaper and just round over these edges a little bit more with the sandpaper. There we go. That just slid right in there. So we're going to go ahead and do this to all our back slats, get that router, get all the edges. In fact, I'm going to hit not just the very ends, but I'm going to go ahead and do the entire length of these back slats with this 1/8 inch round over bit right now. Save some time later. So I'm going to get this done to all of them here. This will be all 6 of my slats, and maybe have to do some little touch-up sanding as well, just to make sure they all fit. Okay, I just finished sanding them, getting them all rounded over, and it looks like they all fit. We're just gonna go do a dry fit here to see if it all fits together. Just like to tap them down in there, and then we're gonna get our top piece on here, line everything up nice, and then again, just give it little taps as you're putting this together. We don't wanna smack it so hard that we break it. You could also just maybe gently clamp it. There it is. We got our back all in there, all the slats. Looks really nice. Now let's go ahead and just make sure everything all fits together. We're going to take our legs, our rails with our tenons that we cut on that PantoRouter, put those together. And then we get our back legs here, make sure they're all facing the right way. Kind of just dry fit it all together here. Again, we're not gluing this yet. And if we did this right, it should just fit right in perfect. And look at this. It looks like it's going together just great. Give it some taps, we'll fit it all together. If you need to make some adjustments or other things, we can trim some things at this point. We're just checking to make sure this fits. And this one looks really nice. Came together. So there is the back of our rocking chair, and that's the front part there. Looking great, making progress.